There is a specific kind of tired that no one talks about. Not the tired that comes from working too hard or sleeping too little. This is a different kind. It is the tired that settles into your chest after a long day of being everything to everyone and somehow still going home feeling completely empty. You gave and smiled and listened and held space and made people feel better, and then you closed the door behind you and sat in the quiet and felt, somehow, more alone than anyone around you could possibly understand. That is the tired I want to talk about today. And if you just felt something shift in your chest reading those words, if something in you whispered yes, that, then this episode is for you. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you is something most people spend their whole lives never understanding about themselves. Here is the thing that nobody warns you about when you are the kind person. Nobody tells you that your gift, the very thing that makes you beautiful, the empathy, the warmth, the way you can walk into a room and immediately feel what everyone else is carrying, that gift has a shadow side, and the shadow side is loneliness. A specific, particular, devastating kind of loneliness that is especially cruel because it lives right in the middle of your relationships. You are surrounded by people, you are needed, you are loved, they will tell you. And yet there is this ache, this sense that while you know everyone else deeply, truly, sometimes painfully, almost no one knows you back. Let's start there, because I think if you are honest with yourself, and I know you are the kind of person who is almost too honest with yourself, you will recognize this pattern. You know things about the people in your life that they have never even said out loud. You pick up on the shift in someone's energy before they've acknowledged it themselves. You sense when a friend is struggling before they send the text. You feel the tension in a room like a physical thing pressing against you. You are extraordinarily tuned in to everyone around you. And what do most people do with that? They use you. Not maliciously, not always consciously, but they use you. You become the safe place, the one people call, the one who always knows what to say, the therapist friend, the rock, the person who holds it together. And here is the quiet tragedy in that. While you are busy being everyone's safe place, you are not building a place that is safe for you. While you are learning the contours of everyone else's inner world, most people are not asking about yours. Not because they don't care, at least not always, but because you are so good at being okay. You are so good at pivoting back to them. You are so good at making the conversation about their needs that people genuinely forget to wonder about yours. They forget because you make it easy to forget. You are accommodating. You are selfless. You are the one who always says, "I'm fine, don't worry about me." And so people, in their humanness, take you at your word. I want you to sit with something uncomfortable for a moment. The loneliness you feel is not just something that's happening to you. Part of it, a significant part of it, is something you are participating in. I'm not saying that to be harsh. I'm saying it because I think you already know it somewhere deep down, and I think hearing it said plainly might actually be a relief. There is a psychology concept called the paradox of the caretaker, and it describes exactly this. The more you give, the more you position yourself as the giver, the more others receive from you, and the more invisible your own needs become. Not because you don't have needs, you have enormous needs. You feel things at a depth that most people cannot access. But you have learned, maybe very early in life, that your needs are secondary, that your role is to hold, not to be held. That asking for too much might push people away. Where did you learn that? Because it didn't come from nowhere. For many deeply empathetic people, this pattern started in childhood. Maybe you were the peacemaker in a family where things were tense. Maybe you learned very early that being good, being easy, being helpful kept the peace, or earned you love, or made you feel useful in a situation where you otherwise felt powerless. Maybe you had a parent who was emotionally unavailable, and you learned to need less so as not to burden them. Maybe you had a parent who gave a lot, and you absorbed their model of love as self-sacrifice. Or maybe there was no dramatic origin story. Maybe you simply came into this world with a more permeable heart than most, and the world slowly taught you that people like you are supposed to pour, not to receive. Whatever the origin, the pattern is the same. You become fluent in the language of other people's emotions and a stranger to your own. You learn to manage the room before you've processed what you yourself are feeling. You become so skilled at empathy that you sometimes lose the thread back to your own experience. Psychologists call this something called compassion fatigue when it reaches a clinical level, But long before it gets there, there is just this quiet erosion, this slow wearing away of self that happens when you give too much for too long to people who never really learn to give back to you in the same way. And the loneliness that comes from that is not the loneliness of having no one around you. It is the loneliness of being fundamentally misunderstood by people who think they know you well. It is the loneliness of sitting across from someone who loves you, someone who genuinely loves you, and knowing that they are loving a version of you that you constructed to be easier for them to be around. They love your patience, they love your warmth, they love how steady you are, but they do not know what it costs you to be that steady. They do not know about the nights you fall apart quietly. They do not know about the anger you swallow down because you don't want to seem difficult. They do not know about the longing deep and persistent to be asked how you really are and actually waited on for the full honest answer. You know what kills me about this? The kindest people, the most genuinely loving people, often have the hardest time receiving love. Think about that. You can give endlessly, but when someone tries to care for you, you deflect, you minimize. You say, oh, it's nothing, or I'm okay, really, or don't worry about me. You make yourself smaller in the receiving as reflexively as you make yourself larger in the giving. And that is not a flaw. It is a survival strategy that has outlived its usefulness. It is armor that you built for a reason and forgot to take off. Here is a psychological truth that might rearrange something in you. Vulnerability is not weakness. I know you have heard that before, but hear me say it specifically for you, for the person who is so strong for everyone else. Your inability to be vulnerable with the people who love you is not protecting them. It is protecting you from the one thing you actually want, which is to be truly known and still accepted. Because here is the fear underneath all of it, the fear you maybe haven't said out loud even to yourself. What if they see the messy parts of you and decide you are too much? What if you stop being the one who holds it together and they don't know what to do with you? What if your realness is not as lovable as your performance of okayness? That fear is so understandable. It makes complete sense given everything you have observed about how people respond to you. Because you have noticed, haven't you, that when you do show need, sometimes people don't show up the way you would. Sometimes they get uncomfortable. Sometimes they retreat. And that confirms the belief that says your needs are too big, or that you are better off self-sufficient, or that the only way to keep people close is to stay in your lane as the giver. But what that belief doesn't account for is this. You have been selecting for people who are comfortable being caretaken and uncomfortable with reciprocity. When you make yourself infinitely available and emotionally low maintenance, you attract and keep exactly those people. And then you wonder why no one is there for you the way you are there for them. It is a painful and perfectly constructed loop. Let me bring this somewhere a little more tender, because I want to talk about the specific flavor of loneliness that comes with being an emotionally sensitive person in a world that is not built for emotional sensitivity. The world tends to reward a certain kind of toughness. It rewards people who don't feel too much, who don't take things personally, who can shake things off and move on. And you are the opposite of that. You feel everything. You take things in deeply. You process and reprocess. You lie awake at 2 a.m. running through a conversation from 3 days ago, wondering if you hurt someone, or if something is wrong, or if the shift you sensed in someone's energy means something is coming. You are exhausted by your own inner life, and at the same time, it is the most alive part of you. The world also tends to pathologize that. People tell you that you are too sensitive, or that you overthink things, or that you take things too personally. And enough of that, over enough years, teaches you to be ashamed of the very quality that makes you capable of profound love. So you learn to hide it. You present the capable, calm, holding it together version of yourself, and the rich, complicated, feeling interior life stays private. And private, over time, becomes lonely. Because the things you feel most deeply are the things you share least often. And the things we cannot share are the things that separate us from one another. There is also something I want to name that might sting a little, but I trust you to receive it because I think some part of you already senses it. Sometimes, and I say this with tremendous compassion, the role of the selfless helper is also a way of staying safe. When you are the helper, you are in control. When you are the one giving, you are needed, and being needed feels close to being loved. When you are focused on someone else's problems, you don't have to sit with your own. There is a secondary comfort in selflessness that has nothing to do with ego and everything to do with anxiety. If you are endlessly useful, you are safe. If you stop and let yourself need, the ground feels uncertain. What if you are not enough without all that giving? What if, stripped of your helpfulness, you are just a person with unmet needs and no particular claim on anyone's love? That is the wound underneath the wound, and I am not bringing it up to make you feel bad. I am bringing it up because I genuinely believe that the kindest people carry this without knowing it, and it shapes everything. It shapes who you choose to love, who you allow to love you, how much of yourself you bring into your relationships, and ultimately, whether you ever allow yourself the experience of being truly met by another person. So what does it look like to start changing this? Because I don't want to just hold up a mirror and walk away. I want to actually offer you something. The first thing, and it is smaller than you think, is to practice letting people sit with your discomfort. Not performing okayness, not rescuing the conversation from your own difficulty. Just saying something real and then staying in it. When someone asks how you are, try answering honestly, even partially, even one layer deeper than "I'm fine." Let there be a moment where you are not managing the other person's comfort around your feelings. Let them figure out what to do with your realness. You might be surprised by who shows up for it. The second thing is to start noticing when you are giving from overflow versus giving from depletion. There is a version of generosity that comes from a full heart, from genuine abundance, from wanting to share what you have. And there is a version that comes from fear, from needing to be needed, from not knowing how to exist in a relationship without earning your place in it. The first one feels expansive. The second one, if you are honest, feels hollow. Even when people thank you for it, there is a part of you that knows the difference. Start learning to recognize which one you are operating from, because that distinction changes everything. The third thing, and this is the most important one, is to start asking yourself what you actually need. Not what would make things easier for everyone else, not what is the least inconvenient option. What do you need? This might be genuinely difficult, because some of you reading this have spent so long orienting around other people's needs that you have lost fluency in your own. You might sit with that question and feel nothing but blankness, or a vague unease, or a sense that it is almost arrogant to even be asking it. That discomfort is important information. It tells you how far you have drifted from yourself. And coming back to yourself, learning again what you want, and what you need, and what matters to you, that is not selfishness. That is the work. That is actually how you stop being lonely. Not by finding better people, though that matters too, but by becoming someone who knows themselves well enough to be truly present in a relationship rather than playing a role in one. Because here is what I want you to hear, maybe above everything else I've said today. The loneliness you feel is not because you are too much. It is not because you care too deeply, or feel too intensely, or love too fully. The world needs people who feel things the way you do. The loneliness comes from a mismatch between the fullness of who you are and the sliver of yourself you allow others to see. It comes from performing a version of yourself that is easier for others and lonelier for you. And the way out is not to feel less. The way out is to share more, to take up the space you have been quietly, carefully, persistently shrinking yourself out of. You deserve relationships where you are held, not just where you do the holding. You deserve conversations where someone asks the follow-up question, where they want to know more, where they sit with your complexity and find it beautiful rather than inconvenient. You deserve to cry in front of someone who does not immediately try to fix you. You deserve to be angry and uncertain and tired and not entirely okay and still have someone stay. That is not too much to want. That is what love is actually for. And maybe the most radical thing you can do, if you are the kindest person in the room, is to start being a little bit unkind to the version of yourself that insists on keeping everyone else comfortable at your own expense. Start being a little disloyal to the role you have been playing. Start letting yourself be a little more known, a little less composed, a little more honest about the fact that the person who holds everyone together also sometimes needs to be held. The loneliness you carry is real, but it is not permanent, and it is not your destiny. It is a pattern, and patterns can change. Not overnight, not without discomfort, not without the unsettling experience of letting people see you differently than they have before. But they can change. You have spent so long making sure everyone else feels less alone. It is time to do that for yourself. It is time to let someone in far enough that the ache finally has a little company. It is time to stop being the kindest person in the room and start being the most honest one. Because here is what I know about people like you. When you finally do let yourself be known, really known, you are extraordinary. Not because of what you give, because of who you are, and you are worth the risk of being seen.